My grandfather gave most of his inheritance in his will, and because of that, the whole family now looks at me as if I robbed them off of their shares. I never thought I'd be writing about family drama on Reddit, but here I am. It all started when my grandfather passed away last month. He was a successful businessman who built his fortune from scratch. Growing up, we were close. I spent many summers at his sprawling estate, helping him in the garden or listening to his stories about his younger days. Grandpa's story was truly one of rags to riches. He grew up in a small town, the son of immigrants who worked in factories. From a young age, he was determined to make something of himself. He worked odd jobs throughout his teenage years, saving every penny. After high school, he started a small delivery service with just one truck. Through sheer determination and a knack for business, he grew that single truck into a nationwide logistics company. Despite his success, Grandpa never forgot his roots. He was always generous, donating to local charities and helping out family members in need. He had a particular soft spot for education, often paying for his employees' children to go to college. It was this generosity that made what happened next so shocking to everyone. My grandfather had 4 children, my dad, the oldest, 2 aunts, and an uncle. Dad always had a strained relationship with Grandpa. He wanted to pursue art instead of joining the family business, which didn't sit well with Grandpa. I remember countless dinner table arguments about it when I was a kid. Dad would passionately defend his choice, while Grandpa would counter with practical concerns about stability and family legacy. Despite their differences, Grandpa always treated us grandkids equally. He never played favorites, always remembering our birthdays and milestones with the same enthusiasm. That's why what happened at the reading of the will was so unexpected. The drama unfolded in the stuffy office of Mr. Johnson, Grandpa's longtime lawyer. The family gathered there a week after the funeral, still raw with grief. I can still picture the scene, the heavy wooden desk, the walls lined with law books, the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner. The tension in the room was palpable as Mr. Johnson cleared his throat and began to read. To everyone's shock, Grandpa left 70% of his estate to me. The remaining 30% was to be split equally among my cousins. My dad, aunts, and uncle were completely cut out. The moment Mr. Johnson finished reading, all hell broke loose. My Uncle Jim stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard that the window panes rattled. Aunt Sarah burst into tears, mascara running down her cheeks as she sobbed into her hands. Aunt Linda, always the most volatile of the bunch, started yelling at me. She accused me of manipulating Grandpa, of secretly plotting to steal the inheritance. Her face was red with anger as she pointed her finger at me, spitting out accusations. Dad just sat there, stone-faced and silent. His reaction, or lack thereof, was almost worse than the others. He didn't yell or cry, he just stared blankly ahead, as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. I was as surprised as everyone else. I had no idea Grandpa was planning this. Sure, we were close, but I never expected to inherit the bulk of his estate. I tried to explain that I knew nothing about it, but nobody would listen. My words fell on deaf ears as the room descended into chaos. In the days that followed, things only got worse. My cousins, who I'd always been close to, stopped talking to me. We'd grown up together, spending holidays and summers at Grandpa's estate. Now, they blocked me on social media and wouldn't return my calls. It felt like losing a part of my family all over again. My aunts spread rumors in the family that I'd been secretly meeting with Grandpa and his lawyers, plotting to cut everyone else out. These rumors reached extended family members and even some family friends. Suddenly, I was getting cold shoulders from people I'd known my whole life. The worst part was Dad's reaction. He didn't yell or accuse me of anything, but his silence hurt more than any words could. He barely looked at me when I tried to talk to him. The man who had always been my biggest supporter, who had taught me to stand up for my beliefs just as he had done, now couldn't even meet my eyes. Mom was caught in the middle, trying to mediate between us but failing miserably. I could see the toll it was taking on her, constantly torn between her husband and her child. The stress was evident in the new lines on her face and the way she'd jump at any sudden noise, as if bracing for another argument. I decided to meet with Grandpa's lawyer to understand why he made this decision. Mr. Johnson's office felt different this time, less intimidating, more like a refuge from the storm of family drama. He explained that Grandpa had updated his will 5 years ago. Apparently, he was disappointed with how his children were living their lives. Dad had given up on his art and was working a corporate job he hated. I remembered the day he had announced he was taking a job at a big financial firm. Grandpa had been pleased, but I had seen the light go out of Dad's eyes. Uncle Jim had gambling problems and had asked Grandpa for money multiple times. There were hushed conversations about unpaid debts and threats from loan sharks. Aunt Sarah was on her third divorce, each one messier than the last. Her first husband had been her high school sweetheart, a match everyone thought would last forever. The second had been a whirlwind romance that burned out fast. The third, well, the less said about him, the better. Aunt Linda was involved in some pyramid scheme, constantly trying to recruit family members to join her business opportunity. Her garage was probably still full of unsold products. Grandpa felt that I was the only one who shared his values of hard work and integrity. He'd been impressed by how I'd put myself through college with scholarships and part-time jobs, refusing to take the easy way out by asking him for money. I remembered the long nights studying, the weekends spent waiting tables instead of partying. At the time, it had felt like a burden. Now, it seemed those choices had led to this unexpected inheritance. While this explanation made sense, it didn't make the situation any easier. I tried reaching out to my family members individually, hoping to talk things through, but each attempt was met with hostility or indifference. Uncle Jim sent me a scathing email, calling me a manipulative gold digger and threatening legal action. His words stung, especially coming from the man who had taught me how to ride a bike and had always slipped me an extra dessert at family dinners. Aunt Sarah left a tearful voicemail, begging me to do the right thing and split the inheritance equally. Her voice cracked as she talked about her financial struggles, how she was barely keeping afloat after her last divorce. It was hard not to feel guilty, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Aunt Linda took to Facebook, posting vague statuses about snakes in the family that were clearly aimed at me. It was strange to see how quickly she had turned on me when just a month ago she had been trying to convince me to join her latest business venture. My cousin's reactions were mixed. Tom, Aunt Sarah's son, told me he didn't blame me, but couldn't go against his mom. We had always been close, sharing a love for old sci-fi movies and obscure bands. His message felt like a small lifeline in the midst of all the chaos. Emma, Uncle Jim's daughter, sent me a long text accusing me of always being Grandpa's favorite and finally showing my true colors. Her words hurt more than I wanted to admit. We had shared a room at Grandpa's house every summer, staying up late to talk about boys and our dreams for the future. Now, it felt like those memories had been tainted. The others simply ignored me. No responses to my texts, no acknowledgement of my emails. It was like I had suddenly ceased to exist in their world. The whole situation has left me feeling lost and alone. I never asked for this inheritance, and I certainly don't want it at the cost of my family relationships. But I also feel that going against Grandpa's wishes would be disrespectful to his memory. He had always taught us about the importance of honoring one's word and standing by our decisions. Would disregarding his last wishes be a betrayal of everything he stood for? I'm torn between my desire to mend family ties and my responsibility to honor Grandpa's last wishes. The money isn't even the issue here. It's the broken trust and accusations that hurt the most. I've always prided myself on my integrity, and now I'm being painted as some kind of villain in a family drama I never wanted to be part of. I'm not sure what to do next. Part of me wants to respect Grandpa's decision and use the inheritance as he intended. Another part wants to divide it equally just to stop the fighting. But would that really solve anything? The hurt and accusations might still remain, a festering wound in our family's history. For now, I'm taking some time to process everything. I've moved out of my parents' house and am staying with a friend. The distance helps, but it's strange to be away from the home I grew up in. I find myself missing the familiar creak of the stairs, the way the light filters through the kitchen window in the morning. But I know I can't go back, not until things calm down. I'm considering seeking legal advice to understand my options better, not to fight my family, but to make sure I'm doing everything right. The weight of this inheritance feels heavy on my shoulders, and I want to make sure I'm handling it responsibly. This whole experience has shown me a side of my family I never knew existed. It's painful to see how money can change people and tear relationships apart. The people I've known and loved my whole life suddenly feel like strangers. It's like looking at a familiar photograph and realizing all the faces have changed. I just hope that someday they'll realize that I never meant for any of this to happen. that I'm still the same person I was before, still their family. But for now, all I can do is try to navigate this new reality as best I can. Has anyone been in a similar situation? Any advice on how to handle this would be appreciated. I feel like I'm losing my family, and I don't know how to fix it. The path forward feels unclear, and for the first time in my life, I'm not sure where to turn. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone who commented and offered advice. Your support meant a lot during this difficult time. After much consideration, I decided to stand my ground and honor my grandfather's wishes. This decision wasn't easy, but I realized that caving into my family's demands wouldn't solve the underlying issues. It felt like I was at a crossroads, and whichever path I chose would permanently change my relationships with my family. I met with Mr. Johnson again to discuss the details of the inheritance. His office, once a place of family turmoil, now felt like a sanctuary where I could get clear, unbiased information. It turns out that Grandpa had set up a trust, with specific conditions on how the money should be used. A significant portion is earmarked for charitable causes he cared about, and another part is to be invested in sustainable businesses. As Mr. Johnson explained the details of the trust, I couldn't help but feel a surge of admiration for my grandfather. Even in death, he was trying to make a positive impact on the world. It reminded me of the summers I spent with him, listening to his stories about the importance of giving back to the community. This trust wasn't just about money. It was about continuing his legacy of generosity and social responsibility. This revelation reinforced my belief that Grandpa had put a lot of thought into his decision. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice or an act of favoritism. It was a carefully considered plan to ensure his wealth would be used in a way that aligned with his values. Armed with this information, I tried one last time to reach out to my family. I invited everyone to a meeting at a neutral location, a conference room at a local hotel. The days leading up to the meeting were filled with anxiety. Would they even show up? And if they did, would they listen? To my surprise, most of them showed up, though the atmosphere was tense. The conference room felt too small, too stuffy, as if it could barely contain the emotions swirling within it. I could feel the weight of their stares as I stood up to speak. I explained everything I'd learned about Grandpa's intentions and the structure of the trust. I talked about the charities he wanted to support, the sustainable businesses he hoped to foster. As I spoke, I could see a mix of emotions playing across their faces: surprise, skepticism, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of understanding. I also made it clear that while I was open to discussion, I wouldn't be bullied into going against Grandpa's wishes. It was hard to say those words, to stand firm in the face of my family's disappointment and anger. But I remembered Grandpa's lessons about integrity and knew I had to stay true to my convictions. The reactions were mixed. Dad, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. His voice was quiet, but in the tense silence of the room, it carried clearly. He admitted that he'd been angry not at me, but at himself. He regretted giving up on his art and disappointing Grandpa. As Dad spoke, I remembered the paintings that used to fill our house, the smell of turpentine that always clung to his clothes. I thought about the day he had packed away his easel, declaring that it was time to grow up and get a real job. It was a breakthrough moment, and for the first time since this all began, I felt a glimmer of hope for our relationship. Uncle Jim, on the other hand, wasn't satisfied. His face was red, his hands clenched into fists as he accused me of putting on a show and stormed out halfway through the meeting. The slam of the door behind him felt like a physical blow, a stark reminder of how deep the rift in our family had become. Aunt Sarah seemed conflicted, torn between her desire for the money and her realization that Grandpa's decision wasn't my fault. I could see the struggle playing out on her face, the way she bit her lip and couldn't quite meet my eyes. She had always been the peacemaker in the family, and I could tell she was trying to find a way to bridge the gap. Aunt Linda surprised everyone by apologizing for her behavior. She confessed that she'd been projecting her own guilt onto me. Apparently, Grandpa had confronted her about the pyramid scheme before he died, and she felt ashamed. As she spoke, I remembered the enthusiastic way she used to talk about her business opportunity, always with a slightly desperate edge to her voice. Now, that desperation was gone, replaced by a quiet humility that was new to her. My cousins were mostly quiet during the meeting. Emma, who had been one of the most vocal against me, approached me afterwards. She didn't apologize outright, but she did admit that she might have jumped to conclusions. It's a small step, but I'll take it. As we talked, I was reminded of our shared childhood memories, the late-night gossip sessions, the inside jokes, the secrets we'd sworn to keep forever. It gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to that closeness. The meeting didn't solve everything, but it was a start. At least now, most of my family understands that I'm not the villain they'd made me out to be. There's still tension, especially with Uncle Jim, but it feels like we're moving in the right direction. In the weeks following the meeting, I've been busy learning about managing the trust. It's overwhelming, but also exciting. I'm determined to use this inheritance to make a positive impact, just as Grandpa wanted. I've been reading books on finance and philanthropy, trying to educate myself on how to best manage this responsibility. I've started reaching out to the charities Grandpa specified in the trust. One of them is an organization that provides art supplies and classes to underprivileged kids. When I told Dad about this, I saw a spark in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. He's even talking about volunteering there. The thought of him picking up a paintbrush again, of rediscovering that part of himself that he had buried for so long, fills me with a bittersweet joy. Mom has been my rock through all of this. She's been mediating between me and Dad, and slowly, we're rebuilding our relationship. We're not back to where we were before, but we're talking again, and that's progress. I see the relief in her eyes every time Dad and I manage to have a conversation without tension, and I'm grateful for her unwavering support. Aunt Sarah called me last week. She was hesitant at first, but eventually opened up about her financial struggles due to her divorces. While I can't give her money directly from the trust, I'm looking into ways to help her get back on her feet, maybe by funding some career training programs. It feels good to be able to help, to use this inheritance in a way that can make a real difference in my family's lives. Uncle Jim is still not speaking to me, and honestly, I'm okay with that for now. His gambling problem is serious, and I don't want to enable him. Instead, I'm researching addiction recovery programs that the trust could potentially support. It's a delicate situation, and I'm trying to find a way to help without overstepping or making things worse. As for my cousins, it's a mixed bag. Tom and I have started texting again, mostly about neutral topics like sports and movies. It's not much, but it's a start. Emma is still distant, but she did accept my friend request on Instagram, so that's something. The others are slowly coming around, though things are still awkward. It's strange to navigate these relationships that were once so close and easy, now fraught with tension and unspoken words. Managing this inheritance is a huge responsibility, and there are days when I feel overwhelmed. The sheer scope of it all, the financial decisions, the charitable initiatives, the family dynamics, sometimes feels like too much. But then I remember Grandpa's faith in me, and it gives me strength. I'm determined to prove that his trust wasn't misplaced. There's still a long road ahead in healing family relationships, but I'm cautiously optimistic. This experience has taught me a lot about standing up for myself while still being compassionate towards others. I'm not the same person I was when this all started, and in some ways, that's a good thing. I've had to grow up fast, to learn to make tough decisions and stick to them. I'll keep you updated on how things progress. Thank you again for all your support and advice. It's made a world of difference knowing that there are people out there who understand and care, even if they're strangers on the internet. It's been a source of strength during this challenging time. Update 2. Another month has passed, and I wanted to give you all an update on the situation. Things have been interesting, to say the least. The biggest news is that Uncle Jim has taken legal action. He's contesting the will, claiming that Grandpa wasn't of sound mind when he made his decision. It's a baseless claim. Grandpa was sharp as a tack until the end. But it's causing a lot of stress. I've had to hire a lawyer to deal with this, which is eating into both my time and the trust's resources. The day I was served with the legal papers is etched in my memory. It was a sunny afternoon, and I was just getting back from a meeting with one of the charities we're supporting. The knock on the door, the courier handing me the thick envelope. It felt surreal, like something out of a TV drama. As I read through the legal jargon, I felt a mix of anger, disappointment, and oddly, pity for Uncle Jim. How had it come to this? This move has caused another rift in the family. Aunt Sarah and Aunt Linda are furious with Uncle Jim, feeling that he's stirring up drama just as things were starting to calm down. I overheard a heated phone call between Aunt Sarah and Uncle Jim, with Aunt Sarah telling him he was tearing the family apart. It's strange to have them on my side now, when just a few months ago they were accusing me of the same thing. Dad, surprisingly, has been supportive of me through this. He even offered to testify about Grandpa's mental state if it comes to that. It's a bittersweet development. I'm grateful for his support, but sad that it took this legal battle to bring us closer. We've been talking more, often late into the night, about Grandpa, about Dad's art, about the future. It feels like we're getting to know each other all over again. On a more positive note, the charitable initiatives are starting to take shape. The art program for underprivileged kids that I mentioned in my last update? It's been a huge success. Dad has indeed started volunteering there, teaching a weekly painting class. It's amazing to see him rediscovering his passion for art. Mom says she hasn't seen him this happy in years. Last week, I stopped by during one of his classes. Seeing him there, surrounded by eager kids, paintbrush in hand and a smile on his face, it was like seeing the dad I remembered from my childhood. Aunt Linda has done a complete 180. She's abandoned the pyramid scheme and has been helping me research sustainable business opportunities for the trust to invest in. It's been great working with her and seeing this new side of her personality. She's got a keen eye for detail and a knack for numbers that I never knew about. We've been spending a lot of time together, poring over business plans and financial reports. It's brought us closer, and I'm starting to see her less as just Aunt Linda and more as a person in her own right. Aunt Sarah took me up on the offer for career training. She's enrolled in a program to become a paralegal and is throwing herself into her studies. It's early days, but she seems motivated and excited about this new direction in her life. She calls me often to chat about her classes or ask for advice on assignments. It's a new dynamic for us, and I'm enjoying getting to know this more focused, determined version of my aunt. My cousins are slowly coming around. Tom and I are back to our old friendship, and he's been a great support through all of this. We've started having weekly video game nights like we used to, and it feels like old times. Emma is still a bit standoffish, but she did reach out to apologize for her initial reaction. We met for coffee last week, and while it was a bit awkward at first, by the end, we were laughing about old family stories. The others fall somewhere in between, not hostile, but not exactly warm either. It's a work in progress. Managing the trust is still challenging, but I'm getting the hang of it. I've assembled a team of financial advisors and lawyers to help me navigate the complexities. It's a steep learning curve, but I'm determined to do right by Grandpa's legacy. Some days, I find myself wishing I could talk to him, ask for his advice. But then I remember all the lessons he taught me over the years, and I feel like he's still guiding me in a way. The legal battle with Uncle Jim is ongoing, and honestly, it's the most stressful part of all this. His gambling problem has apparently gotten worse, and I suspect this lawsuit is a desperate attempt to get money to cover his debts. It's sad to see him self-destructing like this, but I can't let that affect my resolve to honor Grandpa's wishes. I've tried reaching out to him a few times, offering to help him find treatment for his addiction, but he's not receptive. It's hard to watch someone you care about spiral like this, especially when they refuse help. Despite the ongoing drama with Uncle Jim, I feel like I'm finally finding my footing in this new reality. It's not easy, and there are days when I wish Grandpa had just split everything equally. But then I see the good that's coming from following his wishes, Dad rediscovering his passion, Aunt Sarah getting a fresh start, the kids benefiting from the art program, and I know I'm on the right path. I'm learning to balance being firm in my decisions with being compassionate towards my family. It's a tricky line to walk, but I think I'm getting better at it. This whole experience has forced me to grow up fast, and while it's been painful at times, I can see how it's making me stronger. As always, thank you all for your support and advice. It means more than you know. I'll keep you updated on how things unfold, especially with Uncle Jim's lawsuit. Wish me luck.